Alright, so this is going to be part 3 to what if Deku had John's powers from Unordinary. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. 'Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so in the last part we just got done with Deku basically getting to UA and the quirk assessment. There he was able to show people his powers as well as the full capacity of being able to combine two different quirks, which really hasn't been done up to this point in the series. Not only that, but many people in My Hero don't have anything close to Deku or the type of quirk he has, so it comes to a real big shock, especially Bakugo, who had thought that Deku was quirkless up to this point. He had some suspicions in the past, but no way to really confirm it until now. And Deku is basically playing dumb at this point, and Bakugo is getting frustrated at this revelation that not only does he have powers, but he also thinks that he's better than him by ignoring him. So that's really what's going on right now. So let's continue off of that point. So at this point, Deku is really for himself. He isn't trying to interact with most people in the classroom until it's necessary, in cases such as when he needs their quirks. So think like Todoroki, but more approachable. So we would get to the point in the series and where they would need to do the heroes versus villains test. There he would be paired up with Uraraka, and this is where that kind of interaction happens. Just like in canon, both Bakugo and Ida would be on the same team, and they would bicker about it as usual because of how they don't really interact too well. But let's go back to Deku and how he's interacting with Uraraka. Now, the interaction is quite different than it was in canon. First off, Deku is more confident in himself, as well as the detail that I added earlier about him not being very sociable in the classroom. It really affects their chemistry here, and what I mean by that is Deku has this almost disrespectful kind of tone to him. He tries to get Uraraka's attention, but he had forgotten her name. He says, can you show me your power? Was it? And then he doesn't know. He doesn't remember because it wasn't important to him. Uraraka kind of shakes this off as she doesn't want to get mad about it, as it's only been a day or two. So she basically says, oh, it's Uraraka. And that's when Deku's like, oh, yeah, Uraraka, can you show me your quirk? It'd be really useful if, I could be able to use it. But he says it in a more demanding kind of way. So she does so, and Deku says, thanks, I'll be going. She says, aren't you gonna make a plan? I mean, it's two people up there with quirks that we barely know anything about. And Deku says, well, I know about Bakugo, and Ida doesn't seem too much of a hard quirk to, his quirk doesn't seem really hard to understand. But don't worry, I'll get this over quickly. So Uraraka kind of follows behind, and she's surprised by his confidence. Back to Ida and Bakugo. Bakugo tells Ida that Deku, from all accounts, was quirkless until one day he was knocked out by someone mysterious, but he had a glimpse of Deku, but he wasn't quite sure because at that time he knew that Deku was quirkless, but I guess that wasn't the case. Now, he doesn't know exactly his full capacity of copying, but we can assume, or they could assume, that there are some limitations, as if there wasn't, he would have copied more than two. At least that's what Bakugo thinks. As well as Ida thinking more about it, he only copied things that were visual. He didn't copy anything that wasn't, visible. So there isn't many in this, class 1A that is like that. But then they remember a fact or an idea of what happened. They remember a key detail of what happened that day, and that is Deku waited until he was the last one so he could see everyone's quirk. So why did he need to do that? So because of this, they realize that he needs to see it first for him to copy it. So they come up with a plan to basically not use their quirks, as this will give them the best advantage to beat him, as without it, he's just a normal person, maybe a little bit weaker than Bakugo himself and Ida as well. Now, they know that they're with Uraraka, who has zero gravity, so he most likely has that quirk as well. So they need to be really cautious about this. Now, they go and fight him. They kind of wait for him to... They don't actually go to fight him. They wait for him to come to them, as this will make the timer of the clock go down. They would have to go up there, which would waste some time. So it'd be the best option for them to do it. Plus, they know the area of where they're at, and they could set traps or something to that effect. So that's what they do. So Deku would get to the last floor, and this is where he would get into the room. This is where Bakugo would come with a sneak attack and kind of hit him. So they know something about Uraraka's quirk. They know it has to do with your fingers. When you touch something with her fingers, they begin to float, and when her two hands connect, it basically releases it. So they're really trying hard not to get touched by Deku's hands. So Bakugo kind of knees Deku in the stomach after he's getting into the room, and then kind of hits him in the back. Deku is laying on the ground, and this is when Uraraka comes to, tries to help him. But this is where Bakugo tries to get the tape around them so that they could win. From the floor, this is where Deku actually basically leg sweeps Bakugo, and Bakugo falls onto the ground pretty hard. Deku gets back up, and Deku kicks Bakugo in the stomach. While this is happening, this is where Deku would tell Uraraka to go and get the bomb so that they could win by just touching the bomb. So obviously this is where Ida would come in to stop her. Again, he knows something about her quirk, at least the basics, where it has to do with touching. So he doesn't use his quirk, but he is fast enough to really outpace her in terms of combat speed. So this is Uraraka before she, did the internship and learned hand-to-hand combat. So she doesn't really know anything about this. And Ida, coming from a family of heroes, would most likely know how to do things like this. So if he's been training his life for this, he most likely would have been better at hand-to-hand combat than Uraraka, at least at this point. So Bakugo gets up, and this is where Deku kind of steps back a bit. So they're fighting, and Deku actually lands a punch on Bakugo, and Bakugo isn't really phased with this because the fingers aren't actually touching, but something else happens. He begins to float, and he doesn't know why, and because he was hit when he started to float at the same time he was hit, or a second after, so this kind of momentum carries on, and he hits the roof of the ceiling of the room. So not only is he hurt from the punch, but he also is hurt from the impact. This is where Deku releases it, and then he basically, as Bakugo is falling, kicks him in the jaw. So it's very bloody at this point, more than it was in canon, and both of them are really scraped up. What happened was Deku basically used the quirk all around his hand instead of just his fingers. So this is the kind of idea or the kind of theme that happens with John's powers, is that he's able to seemingly upgrade powers slightly, and this is what I would think would happen if he were to use Uraraka's powers. But yeah, so Bakugo is basically knocked out cold by this, and I would say that his jaw was probably broken at that point, just how hard the kick would have been. Plus these are, they're in their hero costumes, so they're not just kicking with regular shoes. It would be something that's more reinforced because of how hero costumes are made. So after that, this is where Uraraka and Deku versus Ida. Now this fight is a lot easier, as Deku would keep Ida basically pinned, or not pinned, but occupied as Uraraka would go. Because Ida wants to stop him, he would use his quirk to block Uraraka, giving Deku the chance to use it, and this is where he would use it to kick Ida down, and basically he would do a roundhouse kick using the jet engines, or the calf engines. It would hit Ida straight in the chest and fly him backwards into the wall, knocking him out. This is when they would win, and Uraraka is somewhat scared of Deku, but she's like more worried about him than she is scared. There is that big part of it that she is, because the fight between them was really, well, bloody. Not bloody, but brutal, I would say, on both sides. Because this isn't a one-sided fight by any means. There is a lot of equal footing at this point, because they didn't really use their quirks. So after that, this is where they would win, and All Might would call the match. So the reason why All Might doesn't stop the match halfway is because, like I said before, they weren't using quirks, they were using their bare hands. So something like this could be easily fixable using Recovery Girl. So this is where they do so. Bakugo would be taken to the infirmary, and so would Ida, but Ida would come out a lot earlier since it's not really that much of, damage. This is where Bakugo would get more angry due to the fact that he lost when not even using quirks, and he lost to someone who he thinks has a weaker quirk, or a weaker quirk in his eyes, I would say, because I don't think it would be a weak quirk in general. So All Might has a talk with Deku, not about One for All, but instead of, he talks about him like, why was he so brutal against Bakugo? Because remember, he doesn't know Deku at this point really, so he wants to understand why he seems to have this hatred for him. And Deku would explain all that would happen throughout his life and how he discovered his quirk. So this is where All Might has a kind of talk with Deku, talking about, you're on this kind of road to become a hero and you're not really doing it the right way. You're just going there as fast as you can, and that's not really a healthy mindset to have. You need to stop and really help others, or get others to help you, as this will be the best and most effective way to do so, because if you do it by yourself, there's no telling what path you will take. But if you have people there supporting you, you have a better chance of seeing or taking the most righteous path, if that makes sense. So Deku isn't really listening to this. He thinks it's kind of dumb, but All Might ensures him that this is the right path to go, and if you keep going down the path that he's going now, you're gonna have more vengeance than you do justice, and it's not gonna really end well for him. He's gonna be someone that may become a villain if he goes or chooses a few wrong turns in this path he's going to take, if that makes sense. So we could get a little bit ahead, and I don't think Deku would win the class representative, because I think they would have this kind of off feeling about him. They would think that he is too extreme, because there would be two parts of the class that would have this opinion about him. One would think that he has a strong will because of how he was fighting through the pain and fighting both fights without giving up, as well as one side that is seeing that he is not right mentally and not right to run the class. So those are the two opinions that happen within the classroom. So everyone's starting to develop two factions in terms of who likes Deku and who really doesn't. So yeah, with that being said, this is the end of the video, and I hope you guys like it. Hopefully I can make a next part relatively soon, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a Patreon requested art this month on November's kind of art, because just no one in my Patreon is responding for some reason, so no one's getting a request because no one's responding. But anyways, let's get to the normal intro, or the outro I mean. So if you like it, please give it a like. If you want to see more, please comment down CS. And with that being said, I gotta shout out the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to be one of these people and get my videos early, you can by going down in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan, and you get these videos early, as well as getting a chance to get a drawing from me, as well as if you pay more, If we go to the second tier, you're able to have a higher chance. So let's go over the names, starting from gold tier to platinum. So in our gold tier, we have Bezcayo. I think that's how you pronounce it. Then we have Dwayne Fenn, Isaiah Perez, Lyco, and Panaman 8 in our platinum tier. So with that being said, I'm going to have a live stream on Friday, every Friday basically. We're going to do art and drawing. If you want to go and watch it, you can. And with that being said, it's going to be a video, so yeah.